If you think your family drama is wild, wait until you hear what happened in my apartment at 4 a.m. One scream, one locked door, and a secret envelope changed everything between me, my son, and my daughter-in-law. But what was inside that envelope? And why did it leave everyone speechless? Trust me, you won't believe how this ends. Don't even think about skipping, because the real shock is still coming. It was 4:03 a.m., and I was in the middle of a dream that, frankly, I wish I could have stayed in. George Clooney and I were sipping espresso on a sun-drenched patio in Lake Como, and he was just about to lean in and tell me something scandalous when, bam! The sound that ripped through my apartment was so loud and sudden I nearly fell out of bed. My heart was pounding, my hair was standing on end, and for a split second I wondered if I was still dreaming. But no, this was no Italian fantasy. This was real life, and the shriek that followed was even more jarring than the bang. How dare you? Who gave you permission? The voice was unmistakable. Megan, my daughter-in-law, was at my door, pounding and yelling like she was auditioning for a daytime soap opera. I could hear her rattling the new lock I'd just installed the day before, her voice echoing down the hallway and, I'm sure, into every apartment on the floor. I could practically feel the neighbors' eyes rolling behind their doors, probably thinking, there goes Mrs. Thompson again, stirring up drama. But this time, it wasn't me. Not really. Now let me ask you, have you ever had a daughter-in-law who thinks your home is her personal hotel? I love Megan, I really do. She's smart, she's funny, and she makes my son Mark happier than I've ever seen him. But lately, she and Mark have been treating my apartment like it's a 24-hour diner, a free laundromat, and on more than one occasion, a crash pad after a night out. I'm not getting any younger, and as much as I adore my family, a woman needs her peace and her sleep. I shuffled to the door, my robe barely tied, my slippers flapping against the floor. I could hear Megan muttering under her breath. Something about boundaries and unbelievable nerve. I took a deep breath, trying to summon the patience of a saint. But all I could think was, why does this always happen to me? I mean, is it too much to ask for a little privacy? For a night? Just one night? Without someone barging in at all hours? As I reached the door, I hesitated. Part of me wanted to just crawl back into bed and pretend I hadn't heard a thing. But the other part, the part that's been a mother for over 30 years, knew I had to face the music. I opened the door just a crack, peering out at Megan, who was standing there in her pajamas, hair wild, eyes blazing. She looked like she was ready to take on the world, or at least, take on me. Megan, it's 4 a.m, I said, trying to keep my voice calm. What on earth is going on? She glared at me, her hands on her hips. What's going on? I'll tell you what's going on. I come home after a long night and I can't even get into my own mother-in-law's apartment. You changed the locks. Who does that? I sighed, rubbing my temples. Megan, honey, I didn't think you'd be coming by at this hour. I needed a little space. You and Mark have been here a lot lately and... She cut me off, her voice rising again. So you just lock us out? Without even telling us? That's not how family works, you know. I could feel my cheeks burning, partly from embarrassment and partly from frustration. I glanced down the hallway, half expecting to see Mrs. Patel from 3B peeking out from behind her door, eager for the latest gossip. I could already imagine the whispers at the next building potluck. Did you hear about the Thompsons? Drama at 4 a.m. I tried to explain, to reason with her, but Megan was having none of it. She kept going, her words tumbling out faster than I could keep up. We help you out, we bring you groceries, we check in on you, and this is how you thank us? By locking us out in the middle of the night? I wanted to laugh, really I did. The idea that they were helping me out was almost comical. If anything, I was the one doing the helping, making sure they had clean towels, a hot meal, and a place to crash when their own apartment felt too small or too noisy or too... whatever, but I bit my tongue. No sense in making things worse. Instead, I took a deep breath and tried to find the humor in the situation. Well, at least you know the new lock works, I said, forcing a smile. No one's getting in without a key. Megan didn't laugh. She just stared at me, her eyes narrowing. This isn't funny, Mom, not at all. And that's when I realized this wasn't just about a lock. This was about boundaries, about respect, about the delicate dance we all do when family gets a little too close for comfort. I loved Megan and Mark, but I also loved my own space, my own routine, my own quiet mornings with George Clooney, dream or no dream. As Megan stormed off down the hallway, muttering about unbelievable mothers-in-law, I closed the door and leaned against it, my heart still racing. I knew this wasn't over, not by a long shot, but for now at least I had my peace, and maybe, just maybe, a little more respect for the power of a good lock. And as I crawled back into bed, I couldn't help but wonder, was I the villain in this story, or just a woman trying to reclaim a little piece of her own life? Either way, I knew one thing for sure. Family drama never sleeps, and neither, apparently, do I. Before I could even tie my robe properly, I heard the unmistakable sound of Mark's heavy footsteps thundering down the hallway. If Megan's scream had woken the building, Mark's entrance was about to shake the foundation. He appeared in the doorway, hair sticking up in every direction like he'd just wrestled a porcupine, eyes wide with confusion and a touch of panic. "Mom, what is going on? Why did you change the locks?" he demanded, his voice still thick with sleep, but laced with that familiar tone he used as a teenager when he thought I was being unreasonable. I could see Megan hovering behind him, arms crossed, glaring at me as if I'd just canceled Christmas and Thanksgiving in one fell swoop. I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself. My heart was still racing from the earlier commotion, and I could feel the beginnings of a headache pulsing at my temples. "Mark, honey, I needed some peace and quiet. You two have been coming and going at all hours. I needed boundaries." There it was, out in the open. The word that seems to set every family gathering on edge. Boundaries. I said it as gently as I could, but I could see the effect it had on both of them. Mark's face fell, and Megan's glare intensified, her lips pressed into a thin, disapproving line. Megan wasted no time jumping in. "You can't just lock us out." "We're family," she snapped, her voice rising again. "What if there was an emergency? What if we needed you?" She looked at Mark for backup, and he nodded, his expression softening just a bit. "Mom, we're just trying to help. We thought you liked having us around. Now, I know what you're probably thinking. Why not just talk to them?" Oh, believe me, I tried. I tried dropping hints. I tried gentle reminders. I even tried the old, "I'm not as young as I used to be" speech. But sometimes, actions speak louder than words, or in this case, locks. I'd reached my limit after the third night in a row of them, stumbling in after midnight, giggling and whispering like teenagers, raiding my fridge, and leaving a trail of shoes, jackets, and takeout containers in their wake. I love my family, but I also love my sleep, my routines, and, let's be honest, my sanity. I looked at Mark, trying to keep my voice steady. "Sweetheart, I love you both, but I need my own space. I need to know that when I go to bed at night, I won't be woken up by someone coming in at all hours. I need to feel like this is my home, not a revolving door." I could see the hurt in his eyes, and for a moment I felt a pang of guilt. Was I being too harsh? Was I turning into one of those mothers-in-law you hear horror stories about? Megan, however, was not about to let it go. "So you just decided to change the locks without telling us? That's not fair, and it's not right. We're supposed to be able to count on each other." She was pacing now, her arms waving for emphasis, her voice echoing down the hallway. I could almost hear Mrs. Patel's teacup rattling on the other side of the wall. Mark stepped forward, his tone softer but still firm. "Mom, we get that you want space, but you could have talked to us. We would have listened." I almost laughed at that, if only it were true. I'd tried talking, but every conversation ended with promises to do better and be quieter, which lasted about as long as a carton of ice cream in my freezer. I sighed, feeling the weight of the moment pressing down on me. I know I should have said something more directly. But I didn't know how. I didn't want to hurt your feelings, but I also couldn't keep pretending everything was fine. I need to take care of myself too. There was a long, heavy silence. Mark looked at Megan, and Megan looked at the floor. For a moment, I wondered if I'd gone too far, if I'd just created a rift that couldn't be mended. But then Mark did something that surprised me. He reached out and took my hand, his eyes softening. "Mom, we love you. We don't want you to feel like you can't tell us how you feel. We didn't realize we were making things so hard for you." Megan, still bristling, nodded reluctantly. I guess we got a little too comfortable, she admitted, her voice quieter now. I felt a wave of relief wash over me, mixed with a bittersweet ache. Setting boundaries with family is never easy, especially when you love them so much it hurts. But sometimes loving someone means being honest, even when it's uncomfortable. I squeezed Mark's hand and managed a small smile. I know you didn't mean any harm. I just need a little more breathing room. For all our sakes. Megan finally looked up, her expression softening just a bit. Maybe we can figure out a schedule or something. So you know when we're coming, and we know when you need your space. It wasn't a perfect solution, but it was a start. I nodded, feeling a glimmer of hope. As the three of us stood there in the hallway, the early morning light creeping in through the windows, I realized that this confrontation, as uncomfortable as it was, might just be the beginning of a new understanding between us. Family isn't always easy, but it's always worth fighting for, even if it means changing a few locks along the way. Mark's face was red, his jaw clenched so tight I thought he might crack a tooth. "You can't do this! We have a right to be here!" he barked, his voice echoing off the hallway walls. Megan, standing just behind him, looked ready to jump in and back him up, but for once I didn't flinch. I didn't raise my voice or try to explain myself again. Instead, I reached into the pocket of my robe and pulled out a small white envelope. I'd written their names on the front in my best cursive, the way I used to sign their birthday cards when Mark was little. I held it out to him, my hand steady, my lips pressed together in a thin line. No words, just the envelope. For a moment, Mark just stared at it, as if I'd handed him a live grenade. Megan's eyes darted from my face to the envelope and back again, her expression a mix of suspicion and curiosity. Mark finally took the envelope, his fingers trembling just a little. He tore it open, the paper ripping louder than I expected in the early morning quiet. He pulled out the letter, unfolding it slowly, his eyes scanning the page. Megan leaned in, peeking over his shoulder, and for the first time that morning, she was quiet. The hallway, which had been filled with shouting and accusations just moments before, was suddenly still. I watched their faces as they read, my heart pounding in my chest. I'd spent hours writing that letter the night before, pouring out everything I'd been feeling for weeks, maybe even months. I told them how much I loved them, how grateful I was for their company and their help, but also how overwhelmed I'd become. I wrote about the sleepless nights, the constant noise, the feeling that my home was no longer my sanctuary. I tried to be honest without being hurtful, to explain that needing space didn't mean I loved them any less. I even added a little humor, reminding them of the time Mark tried to make pancakes in my kitchen and set off the smoke alarm, and how we'd all ended up eating cereal in our pajamas, laughing until our sides hurt. And, just to lighten the mood, I'd tucked in a $50 gift card to their favorite brunch spot. Because honestly, who can stay mad over pancakes? I figured if nothing else, a stack of blueberry pancakes and a couple of mimosas might soften the blow. As Mark read, I saw his shoulders relax, the anger draining from his face. Megan's eyes, which had been flashing with indignation all morning, softened too. She reached out and touched Mark's arm, a silent gesture that said more than words ever could. For a long moment, none of us spoke. The only sound was the distant hum of the elevator and the soft ticking of the clock in my living room. Finally, Mark looked up, his eyes shining with something I couldn't quite place. Maybe understanding, maybe regret, maybe just plain exhaustion. "Mom," he said quietly, "I didn't realize you felt this way. I thought we were helping." His voice was softer now, the anger gone, replaced by something gentler. Megan nodded, her lips pressed together, her eyes glistening. "We just wanted to be close to you. We didn't mean to take over your life." I felt a lump rise in my throat, and for a moment, I had to look away. I'd been so afraid that telling them the truth would push them away, that they'd be hurt or angry or, worst of all, disappointed in me. But as I stood there watching them read my words, I realized that maybe, just maybe, honesty was the only way forward. I took a shaky breath and tried to smile. "I know you didn't mean any harm. And I love having you around, just maybe not at 4 a.m. I tried to make it a joke, and to my relief, Mark actually laughed. Megan managed a small smile too, her shoulders relaxing as the tension in the hallway finally began to melt away. "We can do better," Mark said, folding the letter and slipping it back into the envelope. We'll give you more space. And maybe we can all go to brunch together next weekend. On us this time." Megan nodded eagerly, her earlier anger forgotten. "And we promise, no more surprise visits, at least not before noon." I felt a wave of relief wash over me, so strong I had to lean against the doorframe for support. For weeks, I'd been carrying the weight of this conversation, dreading the fallout, convinced that setting boundaries would mean losing the people I loved most. But in that moment, I realized that real love, messy, complicated, beautiful love, could survive a little honesty. Maybe even thrive because of it. I looked at Mark and Megan, my heart full to bursting, and I knew we'd all be okay. Maybe things wouldn't be perfect, but they'd be better, healthier, more respectful of everyone's needs, including mine. As the sun began to rise, casting a warm golden glow through the hallway window, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time: hope. Hope that we could find a new way to be a family, one that honored everyone's boundaries and needs. Hope that I could have my quiet mornings back, my peaceful evenings, my little slice of sanctuary. And hope that no matter what, we'd always find our way back to each other, even if it took a locked door and a heartfelt letter to get there. Mark slipped the envelope into his pocket, and Megan gave me a quick, unexpected hug. "Thank you for telling us how you feel," she whispered. "We love you." I hugged her back, feeling lighter than I had in months. As they headed back down the hallway, I closed my door, finally ready to face the day, and maybe, just maybe, ready to dream about George Clooney again, this time uninterrupted. The hallway was quiet, the kind of quiet that settles in after a storm. For a moment, none of us said a word. Mark stood there, the envelope still in his hand, his eyes darting between me and Megan. Megan, for her part, was dabbing at her eyes with the sleeve of her sweatshirt, her earlier fire now replaced by something softer, more vulnerable. I could feel the tension in my own shoulders, the kind that comes from holding your breath for too long, finally beginning to ease. It was as if we were all waiting for someone to say the right thing, to break the spell and let us move forward. After what felt like an eternity, Mark finally cleared his throat and spoke, his voice gentle and a little shaky. "Mom, we didn't realize we were overwhelming you. We love being around you." He looked at me with those big brown eyes that, even after all these years, could still melt my heart. There was no anger left in his voice, just a kind of quiet regret, and underneath it, a deep, abiding love. Megan nodded, her cheeks still damp with tears. "I'm sorry, I guess we got a little too comfortable," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "We never meant to make you feel like you didn't have your own space. We like being here, with you." She gave a little laugh, half embarrassed, half relieved, and I couldn't help but smile. The truth was, I liked having them around too, just not at all hours, and not when it meant sacrificing my own peace and quiet. But hearing them say it, hearing them acknowledge how I felt, made all the difference in the world. We all laughed then, the kind of laughter that bubbles up when the worst is over and you realize, against all odds, that everything is going to be okay. It was a little shaky at first, but soon we were all giggling, the sound echoing down the hallway, and I'm sure making the neighbors wonder what on earth was going on now. But I didn't care. If you can't laugh at family drama, what can you laugh at? Life is too short to hold grudges, especially with the people you love most. Once the laughter died down, we started talking, really talking, the way we hadn't in a long time. We talked about boundaries, about what we all needed to feel comfortable and respected. I told them how much I valued my quiet mornings, my slow starts to the day with a cup of coffee and the newspaper, and how much I needed that time to myself. Mark and Megan admitted that they'd gotten used to popping in whenever they felt like it, never stopping to think about how it might affect me. It was a hard conversation, but it was honest, and that honesty felt like a breath of fresh air. We agreed on some new ground rules, simple things that would help us all feel more at ease. No more surprise visits before 10 a.m. because, let's be honest, nothing good ever happens before 10 a.m. unless it involves winning the lottery or George Clooney showing up at your door. If they wanted to come over, they'd call or text first, just to make sure it was a good time. And if I needed a day to myself, all I had to do was say so, No explanations required. It wasn't about shutting them out. It was about making sure we all had the space we needed to be our best selves. To seal the deal, I did something I never thought I'd do. I handed them a spare key. "This is for emergencies," I said, holding it out to Mark with a smile. "Or, if you ever want to bring me breakfast in bed. But remember, no visits before 10 a.m. or I'm changing the locks again." We all burst out laughing, the tension finally, blessedly, gone. Mark took the key, his eyes shining with gratitude. And Megan gave me a hug so tight I thought she might never let go. As we stood there, wrapped in each other's arms, I felt a sense of peace settle over me. The kind of peace that comes from knowing you've done the right thing, even when it wasn't easy. Setting boundaries with family is never simple, but it's one of the most loving things you can do, for yourself and for them. It's how we grow, how we learn to respect each other, how we make room for all the messy, beautiful parts of being a family. Later, after Mark and Megan had gone back to their own apartment, promising to let me sleep in and to call before their next visit, I sat down at my kitchen table, a fresh cup of coffee in hand. The sun was streaming through the window, casting a warm golden glow over everything, and for the first time in a long time, I felt truly at home. My home, my rules, my peace. So, ladies, let me ask you, have you ever had to set boundaries with your family? How did it go? Was it as dramatic as my little lock-changing adventure, or did you find a way to make it work without all the fireworks? I'd love to hear your stories, because if there's one thing I've learned, it's that we're all in this together. Family might drive us crazy sometimes, but at the end of the day, they're the ones who make life worth living. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to subscribe for more real-life tales, laughter, and a little bit of wisdom from one woman to another. And remember, it's never too late to set a boundary, pour yourself a cup of coffee, and start a new beginning.